gas station was deserted, its dim lights flickering in the distance as if the place itself were struggling to fight against the darkness of the night. Sofia and Beatriz were traveling through England, exhausted and with little left to say. They stopped there, drawn in by the promise of hot coffee and a brief rest. The biting wind seemed to carry an omen, as if the solitude of the place made the atmosphere close in around them. The sound of the engine shutting off and the creak of the doors opening were the only noises breaking the silence, but something felt off. The sense of unease settled in quickly. As they approached the cashier's booth, they noticed someone watching them. A man stood in the corner, leaning against a car, his eyes fixed on them. His gaze was heavy, intense, as if he were waiting for something from them. Beatrice tried to ignore him, but the tension in the air was undeniable. The man seemed out of place, like a misplaced shadow in a setting that already had its own mysteries. He didn't say a word, he just watched. And without speaking, the two women knew something was wrong. Fear began creeping into their thoughts, unspoken but undeniable. The terror spread as the man started to move closer, his steady footsteps echoing in the silence of the night. Sofia and Beatriz tensed, still unable to grasp exactly what was happening. His stare became more piercing, and it felt like he was searching for something, a reaction. It was as if fear itself lingered there, invisible, hovering like a thick mist wrapping around them. They exchanged a glance, both sensing that something much darker was about to unfold. The man, now mere steps away, carried an unmistakable air of menace. What did he want? They had no idea, but they knew the answer wouldn't be good. He finally spoke, and his words came out like a threat wrapped in false kindness. "I'm a police officer," he said, flashing a smile that never reached his eyes. Beatrice's first reaction was a brief sense of relief, as if the fear had momentarily pulled back. But the lie was there, lurking in the depths of his monotonous voice, like poison hidden beneath a thin layer of sweetness. Sofia, more cautious, wasn't fooled. She sensed that something didn't add up. His words felt empty, forced. And the way he observed them, as if waiting for a particular reaction, didn't make sense. Who else would be alone at a remote gas station at this hour, she thought. The tension continued to mount, until a sudden beam of light cut through the darkness. A car, headlights shining brightly, pulled into the station, momentarily breaking the eerie atmosphere. The man, realizing that his lie was about to be exposed, took a step back, retreating into the shadows. Sofia and Beatriz, feeling a rush of relief, started moving toward the arriving vehicle, but the man never took his eyes off them. The fear hadn't disappeared, the horror of knowing they had almost walked into a trap was still fresh in their minds. What did he want from them? And why had he acted that way? The questions hammered in their thoughts, but the moment of relief was short-lived. The driver of the approaching car seemed oblivious to the danger that had just played out, but his presence was enough to drive the man away. He slipped into the darkness as quickly as he had emerged, vanishing like a cursed shadow that refused to be seen. Beatriz exhaled sharply, her body still tense, her heart racing. The two women exchanged a glance, terror still coursing through their veins, but now mixed with the overwhelming sensation of having escaped something far worse. The relief didn't feel permanent, and the question of who that man was still loomed over them, threatening the fragile sense of security that the new arrival, unknowingly, had given them. Sitting inside the car, Sofia and Beatriz couldn't shake the lingering fear. The sound of the engine, now running, wasn't enough to dispel the feeling that they were still being watched. The gas station, which had seemed like nothing more than a quick stop minutes ago, had now become a symbol of the unknown, a reminder of the dangers hidden in the shadows. Beatriz glanced in the rearview mirror and for a fleeting moment, thought she saw the man's silhouette lurking somewhere in the darkness. Her stomach twisted. There was something wrong about him. Something felt out of place, and the terror clung to them like an invisible presence, waiting to be acknowledged. They drove down the road, their headlights piercing the night, but the unease refused to fade. The feeling that something could happen at any moment lingered. Sofia, trying to make sense of it all, spoke about what had just happened, but the ever-skeptical Beatriz couldn't stop thinking about the man's behavior. He had been watching them too closely, as if he knew something they didn't, and that was the most frightening part. It wasn't just his words that had felt wrong, but his entire demeanor. There had been something in the air, something they couldn't see but could feel. The fear hadn't left them, it had embedded itself deep beneath their skin. They didn't know what the man wanted, but it was clear what he had tried to do: prey on their vulnerability. The isolation of the gas station, the fact that they were so far from help, the way he had approached them, it all pointed to a trap. And if it hadn't been for the arriving driver, what would have happened? The terror of uncertainty settled in their minds. Maybe it was paranoia, but even so, the fear refused to fade. As the road stretched endlessly ahead of them, they grew more and more suspicious of what had happened. The man may have disappeared, but the fear he had planted remained. Sofia and Beatriz couldn't shake the feeling that the nightmare wasn't over. The road ahead felt infinite, but the weight of terror still clung to them, like a shadow that couldn't be seen yet was always there. The man, that eerie presence, hadn't just been a threat they had overcome. He was a reminder that in isolated places, fear can hide where you least expect it. And sometimes the illusion of safety is just that, an illusion. What would have happened if that driver hadn't arrived in time? Would they have simply become two more anonymous victims of a night of terror? What they didn't know was that the man was still following them. He had a plan. The gas station wasn't his only vantage point. The solitude they had felt hadn't been an accident, and the sinister truth was about to unfold. Maybe what had happened that night was only the beginning of something even more terrifying. And as they drove through the darkness, their eyes fixed on the road ahead, they knew one thing for certain. They would never look at a gas station the same way again. Because sometimes the real terror isn't in what you see, it's in what you feel. In the shadows that lurk, waiting for the right moment. What do you think? What would you have done if you were in their shoes that night? Have you ever experienced that chilling feeling of being watched in an isolated place? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more terrifying stories like this one.